So what's going on, guys? The big one's been announced. Chris Eubank Jr. will take on Conor Benn live at the O2 Arena in London on October the 8th, live on the Dazn pay-per-view to reignite the rivalry both men's fathers had with each other 30 years ago. Obviously, one of the biggest British boxing rivalries in history. Chris Eubank Sr. versus Nigel Benn. Obviously, they had two fights. The build-up for them fights captivated the British public. The first fight, Chris Eubank Senior won via 9th round stoppage, and the second fight was a very controversial draw in which I thought Nigel Benn should have got the decision in that fight. But, you know, people remember the build-up for them fights. You know, you had Chris Eubank Senior, a guy who didn't really acknowledge Nigel Benn in them build-ups. He was a guy who looked down on Nigel Benn. He thought he was better than him, and he didn't need to acknowledge him, and that really got under Nigel Benn's skin at the time, and he hated Chris Eubank Senior. Like, he genuinely hated him during that time. Nowadays, both guys seem to get along. They went on a tour with each other not long ago, like a speaking tour. A lot of retired boxers do, and they seem to get on quite well with each other now. But I think this rivalry now between their sons is going to be interesting to see what they're going to say to each other during these pressers, and hopefully they are next to each other's sons at the presser, because, you know, that's part of the build-up for this fight. We want to see the dads. We want to see the sons obviously fight, but we want to see the dads in the press conference, you know, going back and forth, and, you know, it just makes it a lot more fun. It makes it more interesting. It's going to captivate the public, and that's what you want to do, because, you know, this is a big fight. Both guys are going to get paid a lot of money for this fight, so you want to sell it. And obviously, the one reason why I thought this fight would never happen is the weight. I always thought Conor Benn would just be too small for Chris Eubank Jr. I still think he is, and I'll get onto that in a minute, but Conor Benn, he's not the biggest welterweight out there. He's not the smallest, but he's not the biggest either. He makes welterweight quite comfortably, Conor Benn. And you've got Chris Eubank Jr., a guy who's fought as high as 168 pounds, fought for world titles at 168 pounds, and obviously campaigned most of his career at 160 pounds, but he always looks very lean on the scales. So it's going to be interesting to see what the weight is for this fight. It's either going to be about 156, 157 pounds, I suspect. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see who that favours on fight night, because you've got Chris Eubank Jr. coming down in weight. He could be a bit drained, because, like I said, he looks very lean at 160 pounds. But this is the guy who lives the life. This is the guy who doesn't take shortcuts. This is the guy, you know, who's very fit, very healthy. Chris Eubank Jr., you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't do drugs or whatever. And you've got Conor Benn, a guy who also lives the life. You know, he's always in the gym. Obviously, the famous term, Conor Benn crushing it in the gym. He's always in the gym, Conor Benn. You know, both guys are in peak condition. So it's going to be interesting to see on fight night what both guys look like in the ring. But I suspect Chris Eubank Jr. is going to be a lot bigger. And I think that's going to be a detriment to Conor Benn. And that's why I'm predicting early that Chris Eubank Jr. will stop Conor Benn in about 7 or 8 rounds when they fight. I just think Chris Eubank Jr., you know, he's not a guy who's faded. You know, he's a guy who's never been dropped. He's a guy, he's very fit, he's very healthy. Yeah, he's not the greatest fighter out there in terms of boxing fundamentals. He's not Andre Ward or Floyd Mayweather, but he's a guy who's fought at a higher level than Conor Benn. He's been around a lot longer, and he's a guy who's still very sharp, very quick, hits quite hard. He's not the hardest puncher, but, you know, if he hits you right, Chris Eubank Jr., you can be put down and you can be hurt. And Conor Benn, I don't think he'll be able to put a dent in Chris Eubank Jr., because you've seen how good Chris Eubank Jr.'s chin is. He was a guy who was lit up all night by George Groves, one of the bigger punchers at 168 pounds. A guy who dropped Carl Froch, a guy who had an iron chin. And Chris Eubank Jr. didn't really budge when George Groves was cracking him clean. He's been in there with some decent punches over the years, Chris Eubank Jr., and he's never looked in any trouble. Whereas Conor Benn, he's been down very early in his career against Cedric Paynard, you know, when he fought that journeyman Frenchman, Paynard, and that was probably one of the best 6-rounders I've ever seen in my life. You know, both guys were put down a couple of times, and then obviously Conor Benn put it right in the rematch. Even though he won the first fight, it was very, very, you know, maybe he shouldn't have got that, Conor Benn, but in the rematch he won quite clearly. But, you know, we've seen Conor Benn get hurt in fights, so it's going to be interesting to see how this fight plays out. Obviously, we've got to captivate the British public. Like I said, you've got to get the dads involved. You've got to bring up all the footage of all the rivalry. You've got to recap it all. We've got to go deep into it. We just got to have interviews and pressers, and, you know, just do the whole build-up. Just do it all. That's what we want to see. We want to see the nostalgia. If we're going to do it, even though I'm not the biggest fan of this fight, because I just don't think Conor Benn needs to have this fight, and Chris Eubank Jr. definitely doesn't need to have this fight, apart from financial gain and obviously the nostalgia. But like I said, if they're doing it for that, which they are, then we got to go all in with it. We got to just do everything, you know, get the dads, have them on interview, you know, have them go face-to-face at the presser, and, you know, just do all that. Just get the public captivated, especially now it's on pay-per-view as well. You know, you got to sell this fight. So, yeah, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this fight. I would have rather Conor Benn fight somebody like Keith Thurman, you know, but obviously the fans wanted this fight, and the casual fans are going to like this fight. They're going to turn up. So, you know, sell it to them. So, yeah, comment below in the comment section. What do you guys think of this fight? Like me, or you just like, why not? Let's see what happens. So, yeah, comment below in the comment section. What do you guys think? I'm out.